Well, this season we got two brand new main weapons, and after Chill season added them in such a weak spot that some of them, like the Sniper Rider, became some of the least used weapons in the game, they definitely did not slack off this time on making sure these weapons had some impact to them. After a few days of seeing people try it out in solo, as well as some top level scrims, I want to talk about how I think these weapons play, how good they are, changes I want to see, and more. So without any further ado, if you enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing to help support me, and let's get started. Let's start with the one I haven't talked about yet, the Painbrush, and this is basically a heavy version of Brush. I've seen a lot of people comparing it to Tri-Slosher because they don't like fighting it, but the actual comparison here is to Dynamo Roller. Yes, it doesn't paint as far, but it definitely paints very well at a sizable distance while having that same slow wind-up that can leave it very punishable. Another trait it shares with that weapon is, of course, the ungodly bad ink consumption. The main weapon's flicks and rolls are extremely ink hungry, and on top of that, it has a full 40 frames of lighting before you can start recovering your ink tank, which is a decent bit. Even with Main Saver, you really feel that. Besides that though, this weapon's pretty damn simple. It's a 2 to 4 shot depending on how close you are. The hitbox is about what you'd expect from a brush, and the flicking speed is slightly slower than Octobrush. It is extremely good with angles, the little bit of extra range is very nice, and besides that, it really just comes down to the weapon kit. Hurling Bomb for this thing feels a lot like Hurling Bomb with the normal roller. You are using it as a way to kind of threaten to go close to people and take them out quickly as an added mobility tool to make up for the windup your main weapon has, except in this case it's arguably more useful because it's even slower. I've thought curling on a dynamo could be interesting for a while, and this weapon is definitely a nice proof of concept for that. However, I think the main thing that makes this kit shine is the Wave Breaker. Most Wave Breaker weapons right now that aren't heavy, something directly competing with Ballpoint, which is difficult, either have a hard time getting Wave Breaker to the point where you can't play to it enough, or can't fight well enough to really work with it in a competitive setting. This is the first weapon that can do both. It gets an ample amount of wave breakers, and on top of that has great combos. Up close it becomes a 1-shot, and at a sizable distance a 2-shot most of the time, which is really good for its aggressive potential. I compared it with Dynamo a lot, so I'll get the good news out of the way. This thing is way better than Dynamo. Bad news, that's a low bar. I think this thing is mid-tier, maybe high-tier at best. I'm gonna be honest, the paint and speed issues are pretty bad, and while you can make up for them in theory, other problems are gonna make it really hard to take advantage of the weapon, and the main one isn't even anything with the weapon itself, it's Curling Bomb. Now I know I just talked about how amazing this sub-weapon is for it, however, this sub-weapon is 70% of your ink tank. You get so few flicks before or after that it makes using the Curling Bomb for mobility extremely difficult. This absolutely needs to be a way cheaper sub to work well on this weapon. And honestly, if it was, I think the flexibility it provide this weapon would be perfect for it. It would probably be in a great spot after that, and it's really a shame it's held back by a sub that's just been way too expensive for the past 5 years. Ever since Curling Bomb's lethality was tied to its charge time instead of a constant explosion rate, this thing should have been a cheaper sub. Still though, this weapon only starts to fall off in extremely high ranks and high level competitive play, and honestly for the most part, it's balanced pretty well. I hope we get a little bit of curling buffs in the future, but besides that, I think the weapon's in a pretty good spot, and I'm curious to see what Painbrush players are able to do. The other new weapon they added was S-Blast 92, and man, I thought I had this thing figured out when I saw it. Yup, just a hybrid Luna range blaster that can do both playstyles, but probably a little bit worse at both to compensate for the flexibility. It's gonna be like Ballpoint, it's gonna be very good. I got this thing figured out in the bag. I know what they're doing with it. Then the weapon came out, and some stuff was a little odd. You were able to jump with perfect accuracy, which seemed strange to me with the dual modes, and the blast radius was really small, way more than I thought. The fire rate ended up being the same as range, even in short range mode. How the kit played out was unusually aggressive than what I thought the devs intended. Like, yeah, it's Reef Slider, but the Sprinkler in theory shouldn't be so aggressive, but that was definitely how this weapon kind of used it to try to like paint or move really quickly. When I started playing this weapon after getting down the difficulty of just pressing the buttons properly for each firing mode, I started to realize very quickly that this doesn't actually play anything like a hybrid of Luna and Range Blaster at all. I quickly figured out the playstyle, and it was something a little familiar, so I've got a theory. Now keep in mind, this is a theory I cannot prove, but I think I can uncover what S-Blast 92 really is. It's literally just Splatoon 1 CRB. Now listen, hear me out. If you were a game developer and you knew about Splatoon 1 Custom Range Blaster, how that kit in that game specifically played and went to rebalance and recreate that playstyle in Splatoon 3, I think the process would end up creating S-Blast. There's the obvious part of the weapon's fire rate being the same as range, but also the ink efficiency and whiting frames are much more comparable to Splatoon 1 Range Blaster than they are Splatoon 2 and 3's. This explains the most odd decision, the fact that you can jump and direct people. And yeah, this is not a bug, they literally did a bug fix patch, and it's also way too obvious. This is 100% an intended feature. Range Blaster was really good at going for long distance directs and having a lot of threat because it was very reliable at doing so, and if you wanted to rebalance it and keep that playstyle there, the best way to do it would be to reduce the AoE. By having a smaller blast radius, you emphasize the precise shots that you need, which is what they're doing with this weapon, and you get to keep all of the direct pressure that you had with Splatoon 1 Range Blaster getting reliable shots. Obviously, the short range mode is a little different, but this is a way you can use area of effect without it being as good as it was in that game. You have a range difference. Yes, the blast radius makes up for it, but you still have such a slow fire rate. You can't really just play this thing up close. It requires a lot of help because your kill time is absurdly slow. We talk about Clash having a bad kill time. This one is the same thing. That doesn't make the weapon bad. Of course, you know, it has a long range mode and a one-shot direct and all of that, but it does mean it's not supposed to play short range mode only. Short range is a way for this weapon to still have the area of effect pressure, but take away its ability to do it as well at a distance, forcing you up close in situations where you want to follow up off of previous long-range damage or teammates. It really plays like a custom range blaster that requires a bit more team coordination, and I think that's also why Reef Slider was given to it. Now, Sprinkler's kind of the hole in this theory because it's completely out there, but again, optimally, this is pretty aggressive in terms of just small meat shields for yourself or movement capabilities, and it's come in handy a lot more than you might think. And also, I don't think they wanted to recreate the custom range blaster kit entirely with how powerful it could be. Even if they did, maybe they would want to put it on the regular custom range blaster, so I don't know if that would be a thing anyway, but I guess we have to see. That theory aside, the weapon does play incredibly similar to Splatoon 1 CRB. It's definitely harder in terms of skill ceiling. There's a lot more optimization to do with the smaller blast radius, but perfect shots compared to a little bit of inaccuracy in Splatoon 1. And it also has the positive trait of having a higher skill floor, or reliability factor, than Range Blaster, since the area of effect mode with well-coordinated teamfights can still come into use quite a lot, and in fact covers a lot of its weaker matchups like faster weapons up close that have weaker kill times, such as Splatana Wiper. I think this weapon's aggressive, hyper-QR playstyle, but requiring a bit more coordination, has been so insanely fun, and I definitely think the weapon has a lot of potential. A solid high tier for me, and definitely the best of the blasters. If I could give it one small change though, I would really like to give this weapon the ability to do its long-range shot out of Squid Roll on a wall or Squid Surge. This is actually something I've wanted already, but for rollers, and since this thing's shots work the same way as rollers, it's definitely shown me just how cool it would be. Don't get me wrong, the short range mode is definitely what you want most of the time, but it would be so cool if you had access to both, maybe depending on how long you held the B button or something. It wouldn't do that much for the weapon, but it would be nice, since in a lot of other situations, you could definitely pick which one you do, even off of ink rails by not pressing the B button. Plus, we have Tacticooler on Dynamo. That's a special that makes it want to use Squid Roll off a wall and Squid Surge, and Squid Surging to vertical flick is just so bad, whereas horizontal would be legitimately terrifying, and that weapon definitely needs it. I just think it would be a nice small thing that gives a few more options to both the new 92 Blast, but also the roller class in general that they could definitely benefit from. Besides that though, it really just needs a better kit, and honestly, I still don't know what would be most optimal. Something like a Splatoon 1 CRB could of course also fit, but given the flexibility of the firing mode, something else might be better. I have to see with a bit more testing, but for now, I've really been enjoying it. Realizing that this thing does play like Splatoon 1 CRB, my favorite weapon of all time, is definitely a big part of why I'm enjoying it so much, and I really hope I'm able to push this thing competitively. That's my thoughts on the new weapons. Let me know yours in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.